All right, with everyone still buzzing from UFC 261 on Saturday, let us welcome back Mr. Jon Anik, who was on the call for the whole damn thing, and somehow he still has a voice after that craziness. Jon, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, and if still buzzing you mean feel like I have a buzz, yes, I feel like I am using recreational drugs right now, so it is great to be with you.
Absolutely. So you were looking forward to calling this one. We spoke about a month prior, and not just because of the fights themselves, but it was the return of the fans in a normal capacity. Over 15,000 people in the building, and the people who were there from start to finish were on fire from the opening fight. I would assume having the fans back and being there far exceeded your expectations.
No doubt about it. Can you imagine what Houston is going to be like if this is any indicator? Certainly over the years, as someone who's been to Brazil north of 25 times, when we go to Australia, there are a lot of places that have such an appetite for this stuff that not only are they there for all 13 fights over 8 hours or so, but they watch the entire post-fight press conference for every single live event. And in the United States of America, that is not always the case. This was very much an early arriving crowd. It was a special ticket. There were a lot of people who were non-Floridians from Ohio and other places who made their way to Jacksonville because they didn't want to miss this first event. And I don't have to tell you guys that the fans are the lifeblood of our sport. They add to our live event as much as any fans add to any live event atmosphere. We don't pipe in sound like the Minnesota Vikings, all due respect. So this was a special night from the moment I got to walk out and sort of embrace these fans and was trying to fire them up. Buffer and I were sort of joking that we became cheerleaders, like we became the fans. Like I was literally walking over to sections being like, let's go, Tom Brady. One of the most memorable, if not the most memorable live event that I've ever been a part of. And that is not recency bias. I think the combination of factors made this the most memorable live event that I've ever called.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to discuss from this card. Let's start with the main event because Kamaru Usman knocks out Jorge Masvidal in the second round. The first round is pretty much what a lot of people expected. Like Usman was getting Masvidal's attention with his punches. Masvidal was landing his leg kicks. Usman got a takedown. Masvidal got back up. And it seems like after round one, we were in for one hell of a fight. But then Usman landed that right hand, and it was a wrap. And, most people saw Usman winning the fight. If you looked at the odds are clearly in Usman's favor. But to see it end like that, Jon, I mean, wow. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, I think a little bit the nature of it, but I'm not surprised that Kamaru Usman was able to put him away after what we saw him do against Gilbert Burns 71 days ago. And in theory, putting a training camp on top of that one and getting right back in another training camp with Trevor Wittman. And I've talked a lot about Henry Hooft and the value of all those years for Kamaru, but the alignment with Trevor Wittman has taken his game to the next level. And I don't know that there's any other way to put it. He was going to go see Trevor, Mike, as you probably know, whether he fought Gilbert Burns or not. So again, the appetite for overall well-roundedness, overall improvement as a striker. Most telling thing from our fighter meeting was when Kamaru Usman said, not unlike Floyd Mayweather, he injected Floyd Mayweather's name and said, I know how to let a striking fight build. And I'm like, oh, man, if this dude's saying stuff like this, and he's going to be that dangerous in that realm, look out to the rest of this division. And that's why, to me, the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson matchup is so compelling, to see that stylistic clash. But near perfect performance from Kamaru. Certainly the calf kicks of Jorge Masvidal were starting to rear their head a little bit. And again, you don't want to take too many of those. You take one on the wrong tissue and, it could be real trouble, but a tremendous right hand, just a tremendous fighter. And I think when Dana White suggests that Kamaru Usman appears to be on a trajectory to become the greatest mixed martial arts athlete of all time, he's not wrong. I mean, it looks to me like we're looking at a guy who is destined for undisputed GOAT-type greatness.
Yeah, we were talking about this after the fight. I think most people, as of right now, are pointing to the Corey Sandhagen knockout of Frankie Edgar as the front runner for knockout of the year. I know it's only April. We're approaching May, at least until Saturday. I mean, a flying knee is always memorable, but the aesthetics of this right hand that Usman landed, like the way Masvidal went down, the water and the sweat flying off of his whole face. Right. I mean, when we're doing year-end awards, this knockout has to be right up there. And if it isn't, then we are in for a ridiculous 8 months, Jon Anik.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And you got to think that over the next 8 months, there's going to be something, maybe not on a Joaquin Buckley level, but some crazy spinning back fist type knockout that's going to get consideration. But I am with you, with respect to Corey Sandhagen, this one, I think because of the championship stakes, probably trumps that one. But it just depends, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. DC and I were going back and forth on this later last year when he preferred Kevin Holland's Jacare Souza knockout in a year that I thought Joaquin Buckley had turned in the most unanimous type knockout of the year that had ever existed. So, but you're right. This was a special strike, a special combination for a special athlete. And I'm really excited to see what he can do next, because when you talk about Anderson Silva's record for 16 consecutive wins, for Kamaru Usman to get to 17, what are those next few fights, right? The Covington rematch in theory, maybe a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, which is a fresh matchup if he gets by Gilbert Burns, and then maybe a Leon Edwards rematch as well. If he gets through 3 of those and is 17-0 in the UFC, he can have whatever distinction he wants with respect to my man Johnny Bones, right? So the world is Kamaru Usman's oyster right now, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for being a workhorse, carrying the torch for 2 pay-per-views inside of 80 days, and excited to see this Covington rematch, hopefully in 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, when we talk about, greatest of all time, the GOAT talk, and even like the pound for pound list, it's all subjective in a way. But I agree with Usman at this moment. Like, I feel like right now, because of the activity, the performances, he is the best fighter in the world right now, especially now that Khabib Nurmagomedov is officially retired. Like, it has to be at this very moment, Kamaru Usman at the top of that list, right?
Well, why did Khabib finally get that distinction over Jon Jones? Certainly the style points of his win, but it also had to do with activity, which was the word that you led with. And that's what has sort of pushed Jon Jones not out of the conversation, but back a little bit. All Jon Jones needs in theory is 1 win over Francis Ngannou, and he becomes the best pound for pound fighter in the world. And I will come on your show, and it's not revisionist history. If he goes and finishes Francis Ngannou, how do you not give Johnny Bones that distinction? But right now, all I could think to say on the broadcast before he said it was, you seem to be looking at the best pound for pound fighter in the world. I didn't know what else to say in that moment. And yes, I think given the way Kamaru Usman has sort of attacked this COVID-19 climate, again, the July 2020 win over Masvidal wasn't that long ago. So Kamaru Usman's on top of the game right now, and I think all things considered is the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world.
Yeah, 170 is really interesting. Like you said, look at Leon fighting May 15th, less than 3 weeks from right now, against Nate Diaz, Gilbert Burns, Stephen Thompson, July 10th. Dana White said all week, Colby's the rematch. That's the fight to make. I spoke with Colby yesterday. As expected, he certainly wants that fight. So we'll definitely see what happens at 170. I think the rematch makes a lot of sense. Let the rest of this division sort of play itself out, and then just start lining up new and fresh matchups for Usman. But another classic Thug Rose call, John, was in store for the masses on Saturday night. She knocks out Zhang Weili with a beautiful head kick. She set it up perfectly, looking low, going high, and Rose Namajunas is once again the UFC strawweight champion. What a story this is, John. You called the knockout win over Joanna Jędrzejczyk to win her first title. You talked about how memorable of a moment that was for you. How does this one compare to that?
I don't even know what to say, right? I really don't even know what to say other than the fact that Pat Barry texted me that she executed perfectly, which I think is no surprise to anybody who has followed her and her career. She's just remarkable, right? And that says nothing of the flying arm bars and the grappling that for a time was her calling card, right? Strictly talking about Rose Namajunas, the layered striker, the head movement, the footwork. Amanda Nunes's coaches oftentimes talk about forcing a mistake or just looking for a mistake, not necessarily forcing a mistake, but looking for that mistake and capitalizing. And the elite athletes, the champions, you make a mistake, you will pay the ultimate price. And that's essentially what it is. Zhang Weili, way too linear, and perfect execution by Thug Rose Namajunas. Her knack for producing these type of moments in these huge pressure spots is just crazy because, sometimes you think she's a reluctant champion or a reluctant fighter and maybe would rather just be gardening, and certainly when I interviewed her in Brazil after she relinquished the title to Jessica Andrade, she was liberated in that moment. She was happy to no longer be champion, and now she's really happy to be champion. And I think it's hard when you're the best to not have the title, right? It had to be hard for Francis Ngannou for it to take him 13 UFC fights with all of his physical gifts to break through and become the champion. And I think for Rose Namajunas, when you know in training that you're the best if you perform your best, and then you lose to Andrade the way she did, it's not a feeling that you enjoy. And Rose obviously wanted to right that wrong. And hey, one judge goes the other way on that rematch with Andrade, and we're not even having this conversation. I mean, I could go on and on, but I just love this whole team. I love these people. They're just really good people. Weidman and Gaethje and Namajunas and Usman and Greg Nelson and everybody else. And when good things happen to good people, you can't help but be happy for them. So Thug Rose, baby. She's given us a lot to work with, Mike Heck. That's for sure.
It's so. I was thinking about this on Saturday because my mind likes to race in like random directions, but it's just really interesting watching Rose's mentality because it's like watching golf when you play it and you see guys like Tiger Woods and Dustin Johnson and all these great players and they're winning tournaments and they're shooting 65s, but once in a while they hit a ball in the water, they get an 11 on a hole and you're like, damn, these guys are human after all. And with Rose, sort of like you alluded to, we see her deal with these everyday struggles, the issues with the confidence, the issues with her self-belief, things people struggle with every day. And when you see her come through like that and having to talk herself into saying, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, it's just special, man. It's just hard to explain. What is it like watching her go through all these motions and then leading to these spectacular moments? Because it's really fascinating to watch.
See, when she can channel Thug Rose, which is a byproduct of everything that has brought her to this point in her life, the hardship, as a Lithuanian American, that story is well documented. When she leans into all of that, when I punched Thug Rose at the weigh-in and the intensity that sort of came off of her, when she channels that version showing up in her overalls, fuck all you guys, when that is the attitude that she channels, best of luck. Best of luck to you. But she's not always seemingly able to channel it because I think it flies in the face of just how decent and nice and kind a person she is. She's fascinating, man. I mean, she's absolutely fascinating. And, I think in terms of her flow as a striker, Chico Camus is a guy who she always talks about being just such a great athlete and her most key training partner in a lot of respects because he just gets her in this flow. And when she's able to take that from training room to octagon, scary proposition for the rest of the strawweight division. I'm fascinated to see what they do now because I think you have good options. Obviously, it's the deepest women's division. But as someone who thought Joanna actually beat Zhang Weili, I wouldn't mind a third meeting between Joanna and Rose, even though 1 and 2 I thought were pretty decisive.
Lost in the shuffle of all of this, and it was unfortunate, was Valentina Shevchenko's performance. Because, everyone's talking about Usman and Rose, but I thought, she pitched a near perfect game against Jessica Andrade. That was some performance. Another title defense in the books. Dana White told the media after the event that he thought Valentina was pissed off, that she had a chip on her shoulder for sure, that people were doubting her after losing a round to Jennifer Maia. I feel like in a weird way, she's sort of an afterthought in the night with everything that happened when she probably had the best overall performance of the night, John.
Yes, and just because she doesn't have the $50,000 bonus doesn't mean that she won't get something discretionarily. And by the way, it was a big financial evening for the UFC flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko. But you're right. She was the one facing a former champion. I don't think any of us expected, other than, of course, Shevchenko and Pavel Fedotov, the strength discrepancy to be quite so pronounced. 7 for 7 on her takedowns. And I think you have the best analogy in the Major League Baseball one of a perfect game. It was a perfect performance against a fighter, to Dana's point, who a lot of people thought was going to bring out the best in Valentina. There were paths to victory, or so we thought, for Jessica Andrade. And man, did she chew all that up and spit it out. And I'll tell you guys, when we sat down with her on Thursday, she didn't look good. She looked sort of like she didn't have her coloring. She looked like she was carrying extra weight in her face. She just didn't look right. And thankfully, we didn't lean into that because she certainly looked good at the weigh-in on Friday and later that day, even at the press conference on Thursday, and looked like an absolute mauler on Saturday night. So we'll see what happens with Lauren Murphy and JoJo Calderwood. There's a longer conversation, obviously, in terms of the Nunes trilogy fight for Shevchenko. But, Valentina is defending the belt on big pay-per-views, Masvidal headline pay-per-views, making money. And again, she's not a natural bantamweight, but I do believe that for a lot of us as mixed martial arts fans, we want the closure of a third fight between those two, and hopefully we get it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the June 12th fight between Murphy and Calderwood. We also got Viviane Araújo fighting Caitlin Chookagian on May 15th. And I know Chookagian just lost, so she's probably not quite in the equation unless she does something absolutely spectacular. But Viviane Araújo is an interesting piece to this puzzle. If she goes out there and has a great performance against Caitlin Chookagian, and I spoke with Lauren Murphy about this last week, Lauren's like, I could see her jump in the queue if she goes out there and has a great performance. So Valentina's got options. Obviously, Rose has options because we got Yan Xiaonan, Carla Esparza. They could do the rematch. Mackenzie Dern is a win or two away. Joanna's there. I mean, both these divisions are just so interesting right now.
No doubt. No, and 115 pounds with Yan Xiaonan and Carla Esparza. I do think there's a good chance that a top contender emerges out of that. I mean, Zhang Weili with her 21-fight winning streak, I think, can lay claim to a rematch, And you're right that the cupboard is not bare at flyweight, but I do wonder what the inner monologue is, not when they're talking to you per se, but for Lauren Murphy and JoJo Calderwood, right? Because Valentina Shevchenko in her post-fight interview sort of intimating, like, keep looking for weaknesses or stop looking for weaknesses because there are none. And I really wonder how you approach that challenge, right? Like, if I was a fighter, how would I approach Valentina? I'd probably do something super reckless and I'd get finished in 30 seconds. But I would probably try to do something out of the ordinary, right? And I do wonder how those women approach this particular challenge because if you thought this was one-sided, at least in terms of the betting number, I mean, she's going to be -7, -800 against whoever emerges out of that fight. She was -400 here. So, it's not a problem. Dominant champions are never a bad thing for sport, whether it's George St. Pierre or the New England Patriots. But at flyweight, she is getting close to cleaning out the division.
Of course, I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss what happened before the title fights. Chris Weidman, Uriah Hall began their rematch. Weidman throws the kick. It was checked, and everybody knows what happened by now. And, man, that sound, just watching it on the broadcast, is just something I will never forget. And you were sitting just a few feet away from it. It's just so unfortunate to see, and it's unfortunate that it takes an injury like this, John, to put into context for a lot of these fans the risks involved in competing in a sport like this one. So what went through your mind when that all went down on Saturday?
Oh, my gosh, man. I'm losing my mind. I'm getting emotional. You just bringing it up again. I'm just supremely close to Chris Weidman, and obviously Ray Longo is one of my best friends. He's been on my podcast since episode 1, and that's 6 years. So I spent a lot of time with them during fight week. I just love Chris so much, and I just hate to see anybody go through this. And it's just hard knowing that he's in that hospital in Jacksonville right now, and he is going to be able to go home today. And because he's in South Carolina, he'll be able to go by motor vehicle and not airplane, which is a good thing. But I just feel so bad for the guy. And, the surgery went well. And I think the fact that one of the bones aligned sort of on its own is a good indicator that maybe he might get back to competition even sooner than people would expect. There's no doubt in my mind that this dude competes again. None whatsoever, right? I really do believe that's the safest bet right now, that he walks at Madison Square Garden with much fanfare, and it's one of the most special moments in UFC history. And if you've seen any of the content that Chris has been pushing out since this happened, he said when it happened, he's writhing in pain. He's immediately trying to lean into the positive, thinking about how can I document my recovery, or he's literally leaning into his faith, trying to take his mind to a positive place. I just have so much respect for him. But in the moment, I was off my game. I missed a promo cue. I try not to let that happen. I mean, I was totally off. And the only thing that could have saved the night from there was actually what happened, that we saw some of the greatest finishes in UFC championship history, because we were all in a very bad place for Chris. And, for Uriah, they'll move him forward. He has a 4-fight winning streak, and just, man, you're right, man. This sport is just insane. And I do think if you didn't have all the respect you needed to have for these athletes, something like this happens, and then you have it.
Yeah, and obviously the well wishes to Chris Weidman and the fam. It's just crazy, and you feel for Uriah too, man. Like I spoke with him before the first fight got postponed, and he wanted this one so bad. Like it was the first loss of his pro career, and to have it end like that, like I thought he handled himself like a champion in the aftermath. And you just feel for both guys. Chris saying he's gonna be back in the gym in 6 to 12 months is not surprising to me.
Right.
Like if it was anybody else saying that, I'd probably be like, I don't really buy it. But Chris Weidman saying it, I believe him.
I'm telling you, as an athlete, I've never heard coaches speak about a fighter quite like this. Certainly when people would talk about Jose Aldo, and there are some others, but when Matt Serra and Ray Longo talk about this guy, and when you look at, as an American, his jiu-jitsu credentials and everything that sort of got him to become the undisputed UFC middleweight champion, quick learner doesn't even begin to describe it. It's like you tell the guy one thing and immediately it becomes part of his game. You hear Anthony Smith talking this week, being like, dude, I trained with the guy for 10 days. I got nothing done, like barely landed anything, couldn't out-grapple the guy. He's a total phenom. And his training in South Carolina got him to such a good place that he was ready to sort of resume his ascent and maybe even, get back into title contention, believe it or not, entering this fight as number 11 in the world. So I just feel bad for Carolina Chris, but if anybody can lean into their faith and lean into the positive, it's him and his family. And these are going to be some tough days, but I wish I could get a betting line on him fighting, in 2023, because that shit's happening.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And also tip the proverbial cap to Anthony Smith and Jimmy Crute for their main card opener. That was a fun scrap for those 5 minutes. Great win for Anthony. Jimmy Crute, no real update on his condition right now, but the fact that we have no real update on his condition right now is probably a good thing. I know he's back in Sydney, and we're supposed to get an MRI later on this week, so hopefully that's good. But a lot of great memories on Saturday in Jacksonville. The Stars are out in full force. Tom Brady and company in the building, but nobody got more attention on Saturday night than Jake Paul, John. And in fact, he got DC's attention, your broadcast partner in crime. They had their little face-to-face. That's gotten a ton of buzz. Like, what did you think of this whole thing as it was happening? The F Jake Paul chants, DC getting up and getting in his grill. Like, what was going through your mind as this was happening?
So if memory serves, our producer, Zach Candido, gave DC 120 seconds to settle his business. And Daniel Cormier is a fighter. And as I've texted DC, I like when his Louisiana comes out, But it's an interesting thing because I respect Jake Paul, the professional boxer. I would like to see him boxing boxers and not the worst strikers in MMA history per se, right, to actually do something competitive. But I'm not surprised that Daniel Cormier wants to stand his ground, and you're not just going to inject DC's name into the mix without consequences. And I think he felt at peace after his conversation because he came back to the broadcast booth and not a bead of sweat on his forehead, man. I think he said his piece and felt like he needed to do that to just sort of clear the air. And I can understand why some of these mixed martial arts athletes, feel the way they do about the way some things are happening in combat sports these days, right? But again, I'm in the business where we have a lot of developing fighters in the UFC who come in 3-0, 3-1, and I respect those fighters that are maybe number 650 on the roster that arguably shouldn't be here right now, but is getting a short notice opportunity. And for Jake Paul, power to you, man. Make your money. If you don't like his attitude, I can understand why he's maybe not your cup of tea. I'm just asking for him to not pluck the worst strikers in UFC history. I mean, Royce Gracie and Damian Maia going to be next. You know what I mean? It's like, go fight a striker, and if you want to fight a mixed martial artist, then just fight a striker, So I don't know. I am interested in Jake Paul insofar as him fighting somebody that actually is focused on the discipline that he is focused on. He ain't fighting DC. He ain't fighting Tyron Woodley. That's for damn sure.
Can you believe the attention he's getting these days, though? I mean, it's pretty wild. Like, love him or hate him, he's getting a lot of buzz and a lot of attention. Like, and I know, like, we don't like to throw out clicks and stuff like that, but when Jake Paul ends up on our website, people click it. It's insane to me.
Yeah, well, and obviously you're asking me about it, and I got people sliding up into my DMs telling me I'm not giving him a fair shake, saying that not only is he working as hard as the developing fighters that I just referenced, but that he's also putting in the right work and beating guys that, maybe he isn't supposed to beat in sparring. So we'll see what happens. I think sometimes with certain athletes, you can't get past the facade. Colby Covington is an outstanding human being, right? Like, people have no idea how good a dude there is underneath whatever facade it is. And by the way, Covington is also one of the pound for pound greatest mixed martial arts athletes that I've ever seen, but people can't get past that. And with Jake Paul, people don't want to lean into anything positive. I'm not afraid to do that. Just don't fight Ben Askren and we're good.
Nick Diaz is also in the building, looking shredded, John. It seems like he's ready to get back in there. Do you think we see him in 2021? Like, do you have a good feeling if there was a betting line that you could, play the ponies with? Do you think we see him fight this year?
I don't know if it'll be this year, but hopefully inside of, 10 or 12 months. I love these guys so much that I have a 209 tattoo. So I don't know where you want me to go with this, but I was so excited to fist bump Nick Diaz, and the sport, as I've said, is much better with those dudes in it in whatever capacity. So I think we see him fight. I think what's most interesting is, what is the challenge that he's back for? Is it specific, or is it just, you know what? I'm in the best shape of my life, and it's time to go put the screws to somebody. I don't really know. But if he's back for a singular challenge, whether it's Masvidal or Chimaev or somebody else, sign me up.
Favorite moment of Saturday overall? Like little thing, big thing? What moment sticks out to you that like you'll always have with you, like from a positive perspective?
So Friday, I got to tell you, going fist bump Nick Diaz and then right up on stage to MC the way into that crowd was a very special moment. But as far as Saturday is concerned, it's hard for me to not focus on Rose and Kamaru. Maybe just Bruce Buffer walking out and getting into the octagon like the cheerleader that he is. There were a lot of memorable moments. It's too hard to focus on one, but I guess locking eyes with Joe Rogan romantically right after Rose knocked out Zhang Weili was probably the moment for me. And as hard as it is, this job, and it really is, my Fridays are 19-hour Fridays and 8 hours on a headset. Sometimes it's hard to focus on being so happy and excited when I sit down in that seat, because there's just so much on my plate over the ensuing 8 hours. But it's nights like this that make me lean into and realize that I have the greatest job in the world, and just very thankful for this seat that I'm going to try to go earn here again on May 8th.
There you go. Jon, you are the man. I appreciate the time. I always say, like, yeah, give me 15 minutes and then we go for 28. And you're so gracious with the time, man. I appreciate it very much. All the best to you. Enjoy May 8th. Enjoy the trip to Houston. And I'm sure we'll talk soon.
It's only because I like your Boston accent. I just like hearing that Massachusetts accent. As much as you try to cloak it, I can understand that it's always there. I had a hard time saying Tristan Connolly without dropping the ball. I couldn't do it. And, even on the pre-voice stuff, coming up next, Tristan Connolly couldn't do it without the Boston accent. But thank you, boys. Always good to catch up with you. We'll talk soon.